Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. He's fantastic for many reasons, personal, professional, and otherwise. But I don't know if you've ever found somebody in your life that you met that's kind of one of your heroes before you even meet them. Well, for me, Rocky Brown is one of those guys, and it's personal because he helped save my dad's life. Rocky runs the Mary Bird Perkins Center in Hammond, that program. He's going to talk about that. And he helped my dad go through radiation and beat cancer. And my family is eternally grateful for that, as I know a lot of local families are. And I wanted to bring him on the show today to talk about his personal story and also about the great things they're doing there at Mary Bird Perkins. So with no further ado, Rocky, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Parker. I appreciate the opportunity and very humbled that you asked me to be a part of the podcast.
Well, I know you're super busy and your time is valuable, and I appreciate it. So thank you for sharing it with us. And first and foremost, as I alluded to in the introduction, thank you on behalf of the Layrisson family. Few things have ever been more challenging for us than watching our dad suffer through cancer. And I know, you're very professional, which means you adhere to all the HIPAA laws and confidentiality. So I'm not going to ask you to share any patient secrets here, but I think it's okay for us as a family to share that we were very happy with the care that you and your colleagues at Mary Bird Perkins gave my dad. You literally saved his life. And not only that, you kind of helped hold his hand through the most challenging days of his life as he endured radiation and all these treatments that were so tough. So I know firsthand the work you do is incredibly important because I watched you save my dad's life. And I want to thank you for that. And we're going to dig into that. But before we do, I think it would be cool if we got to know you personally a little bit. So if you don't mind, Rocky, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. And just to touch on what you just said, Parker, you probably give me way more credit than I deserve. I'm just a tiny piece of what goes on inside of our walls. But
I just repeat what my daddy says,
yeah,
around here, what Eddie says goes for the Larrisons. So
that's the way it
I
goes.
appreciate your humility, but I'm not sure I buy it.
Um, well, just a little bit about myself. So uh, I'm a Marpaw native, born and raised. So I've been there for 41 years now. Married to a young lady who's also from that community, my wife Alyssa. We both are lifetime residents of that community, both products of the high school there. We're both fortunate enough to commute to Ponchatoula, Hammond for work. Me at Mary Bird Perkins, of course, and she's been at North Oaks for, I don't want to date her, but she's been there for a while. She's been there for 15 plus years.
That's a wise man that doesn't go into the exact year count with your wife. I need to watch and learn as you do that. But I'm glad you mentioned that because, when we talk about introducing you to the people of Ponchatoula here, sometimes it's not always clear that we interview folks on this show. Some live here, some work here, but all that we interview serve here in some way. And North Oaks and Mary Bird Perkins are basically right on the Ponchatoula Hammond line. When you think about that medical complex there centered around North Oaks, and the parking lot basically is shared by all of you guys, right? So it's like if you're at Belle Maison, which shares the parking lot on the south side, you're in Ponchatoula. If you're a resident there, you vote in Ponchatoula elections. If you walk 50 feet to North Oaks, you're in Hammond. And if you walk 100 feet to Mary Bird Perkins, you're in Hammond. But of course, you're serving Ponchatoula. And in your case, your wife's case, you're probably driving through Ponchatoula to get there from Maurepas. But I know if mom and dad are watching, and I think they are, at breakfast, they told me they were going to watch. Now, dad now being in his 80th year, whether he remembered to or not, is a different story. But as you know, Rocky, he loves Maurepas. He used to coach basketball there. We had another great former Maurepas coach on this show months back, Mr. Reggie Peavy, who's now in his 90s and is a local hero. So there's a lot of kind of Ponchatoula, Maurepas love. We're these kind of small southern towns on, both the south end of Livingston and Tangible Hill Parish next door. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up there? Because I imagine some things were similar to here in our little Mayberry, and some things were a bit different.
Sure. Well, I'll say this, and I kind of talked about this when I was fortunate enough to speak to the Rotary here in Ponchatoula a few months ago. Some of my earliest memories are coming to Ponchatoula with, because that was town, I mean, I guess it still is. Marpaw's far from a town. So if we're going to town, we're either typically people are going to Gonzales, or coming this direction to Ponchatoula. But
well, I can relate. We lived in Killian when I was born, and it's the same drill, right? I mean, if you needed groceries, that's kind of where you ran to, or whatever.
That's right. So, I mean, Marpaw in my 40 years, it's grown a lot. There's a lot of new home construction going on, and a lot of places that were woods where, we used to rabbit hunt and stuff like that as kids. It's people's backyard now, so there's development going on even down there. But obviously, Ponchatoula has changed a tremendous amount. I can remember whenever Ponchatoula got a Popeyes, and we would stop and get biscuits after going to Ponchatoula feeding season. That was a big deal. That was a treat. So, yeah.
It's so neat that you mentioned that, because I remember when I was in high school, Burger King came to town. It's kind of started this whole run. This was a little after Popeyes, but Burger King came, then McDonald's, whatever. But I'll never forget how long the line was at Burger King when it first opened. And I was like, man, you can get a Whopper 5 miles away and in several locations in Hammond. But something about it, when it comes to your town, it's like, hey, that's your Burger King now.
That's right. The locals get excited, and they want that Whopper, man.
Yeah, you're right about that. Well, look, I know, a little bit about your family, because I have for years seen you out at the ballparks and at birthday parties. Your nephew, Zachary Paul Brown, son of your brother Jesse, is a classmate of my son's and has been since they were little babies. And so your brother Jesse's coached my kid in baseball. I've coached his in basketball. Great family. But tell me a little bit about what it was like coming up with a brother like that. He's a very successful guy in his own right with the state police. What was childhood like from kind of a sibling point of view?
Well, I am. I know you have brothers as well. I'm 4 years older, a little bit more than 4, right around 4 years older than my brother. But I can tell you that you've coached with him on a handful of occasions at this point.
Yeah,
2 boys, as you mentioned. So competitive.
Right.
And not just he and I, but our cousins across the street and neighbors right down the road. I mean, Marpaw High School doesn't have a football program and never did. I mean, there's just not enough boys there. But there were many, many football games played in Marpaw that were not sanctioned, I can tell you.
Same thing here. I grew up on 7th Street, about 2 blocks north of St. Joe. And we had the little neighborhood crew. And we would literally make a beeline. Back then, they let you walk home without parents. And so this little crew of Poches and Thompsons and Larisons and the like, and we had our team set. We didn't have to redraft. You knew every day these 3 or 4 kids were going to be against those guys, and we'd be in the yard, we'd be in the park. But it sounds very familiar to what we have going here. Those were my athletic career was short. I was not athletic like you and your brother and some of my brothers. It basically ended on the bench in the 8th grade at St. Joe. But I can tell you the most intense games I ever played were not in Dixie Youth Baseball or Ponchatoula or even St. Joe, or even when I made All-Stars, it was, right there in the side of the yard, kind of 3-on-3 death match.
Well, Parker, where do you, are you the oldest of the boys?
I'm the second out of 4 boys, but we have a big gap. So my oldest brother, Jean-Paul, is 12 years older than I am, 14 years older than Bree, and I guess 18 years older than our baby brother, Louis. Okay. So he moved out. When I say all that just to say JP, Jean-Paul, he moved out the house when I was in like 1st grade. So although I was second, for those years playing ball, I was kind of the oldest one still around.
Right. I got you.
Yeah, but I can relate to what you're saying. It gets hectic. And look, as a guy raising 2 boys who are 2 years apart now, sibling rivalry is real at the 2-year mark, the 6-year mark, and for you guys, at the 4-year mark. So I bet it was intense.
Absolutely. And I mean, it certainly has, it has cooled as we've gotten older, because I mean, I used to play basketball every day until I was probably 30 years old, almost every day until I was 30 years old, but that's in the past now. So we don't square off against each other.
Well, for our viewers, you probably can't see how tall Rocky is, but we had to adjust the camera to make sure his head wasn't halfway cut off. We're used to interviewing shorter folks. So, folks, if you're watching live, we are here with Rocky Brown with Mary Bird Perkins. And right now we're just talking about his childhood and the good old days growing up in Maurepas. Why don't we kind of move to the next chapter? When did you kind of get a feel for what you thought you might want to do when you grew up? What was kind of your path from there to here, if you will?
Well, my path is, I guess, a little unorthodox, and this is something that I have in common with your dad, to bring him back into the conversation, because he and I kind of talked about this before. But he started in education,
right?
Actually, teaching at was Maurepas his first job? Parker, was that his first job in education?
I think that was his first and last job teaching. No, I take that at the high school level. He went from there. Eventually, he taught at LSU. He taught law enforcement at LSU. But I don't think he taught at any other high schools. I think he was one and done after teaching at Maurepas.
So I graduated in education from Southeastern and went to work in Livingston Parish for the school system, and taught in Springfield and Livingston, and then finally.
Great schools, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great stays at all three. Really enjoyed my time.
Did you ever overlap? Your sister-in-law Michelle is a very prominent, now administrator out there. Did y'all ever work at the same school at the same time?
No, I don't think I could have met the standard, Parker. If
she's impressive, man. Yeah, I can relate.
She's got it together for sure. But no, our 10 years never overlapped. In fact, Springfield was where I started.
Okay.
So when I was wrapping up, I moved on from Springfield. But at a certain point, I decided that I wanted to do something else. My wife and I had our daughter, and sometimes those coaching nights can be pretty long,
Right.
And, God bless people who do it, who spend every day in the classroom. It takes a special person to do it. But I decided to move on in a different direction, further my education a little bit, and got into healthcare. And I would credit my wife for that. As I mentioned earlier, she's been in healthcare for quite some time as an RN here at North Oaks. And I really thought about going to nursing school, and she talked me out. Yeah. She talked me out of it. She didn't think my personality fit the bill, And,
well, she knows you best, so she probably had a good feel for the fit, huh?
I don't make a habit of listening to her all the time, Parker, but I did this time, and as usual, she was right. So I went into diagnostic radiology here at North Oaks, at the local program here. And when I finished that, during my 2 years there, we were able to rotate clinically through the Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center here in Hammond. And I just decided that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, I had to further my education a little more, and ended up going to nuclear medicine school and getting a certification in nuclear medicine, which allowed me to do PET scans, which is a cancer detection study that we do here at our cancer center.
And where did you have to go for that education? Because you mentioned you did your initial radiology training at North Oaks. Were you able to do the rest of it here locally, or did you have to go somewhere else?
No, the closest program here or to here would be Delgado on the South Shore down in New Orleans. But man, with the child and trying to work, I just didn't have that flexibility,
right,
to be able to. So I needed a program with some flexibility. So there's a very large, actually, public four-year university in Utah called Weber State, and they're one of the few institutions in the country that offer a distance learning type program. It's kind of a hybrid deal.
Yeah.
So I was able to do my clinical work at North Oaks and at Mary Bird to fulfill that portion, and then did the academic coursework through that university.
Oh, that's really cool. My brother Bree just finished his online, his master's degree, but he did it online. And you're right. Once you hit a certain age and you have responsibilities, both of you have daughters and jobs and responsibilities. Right. It's a great way to get the education you need. I mean, we're blessed to be living in that age, right? I mean, our parents couldn't do that. Our grandparents couldn't do that. So that's really cool. So, you mentioned your wife as a mentor and as a really great advisor as you made this big decision, this big transition. Who were some other mentors? Who were some other influences, people that inspired you, helped you, maybe taught you along the way?
Oh, man. That's a great question. Back whenever I was in school, and you and I kind of talked about this a little earlier at Marpaw. So many of the teachers actually taught my parents, taught my mom.
Yeah.
So I mean, all those people were so impactful from an early age, simply because Parker. It just felt like they were always invested in you. Because
Right.
they've known your family and known you for since you ever came to be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so that obviously being from a small town and having an opportunity to go to a school like that, that made a huge impact, on me. I know that's not specific or probably like you're looking for, but
No, I,
I don't
I
want to
get
get
it because I
myself.
see it. Where I see it, Ponchatoula's grown a ton. So I think candidly, there's probably less of that at the 2,000 person Ponchatoula High School.
Sure.
But at the there's some great new, fresh new blood, like your brother and sister-in-law and their children.
Sure.
But there's all these generational kids that have been there forever. And, for example, I grew up with Kevin Rayford, my pal who's the first assistant with the assessor and will be a great next assessor now that our assessor's retiring. Um, and his boys are older than mine, so they're not in school with my kids. But you know what? I see his sister teaching there. Now she's now Miss Burris, and her son David is classmates with my son James. And these families have been going back. You're sitting actually in what we call in our law firm the Rayford Room, because I bought this building that's now my law office from the Rayford family, cousins of the guys I'm talking about.
Mhm.
But I think I say all this just to say I kind of get where you're coming from. You have these people that have been around forever, and it's kind of like what's the old saying? It takes a village. I mean, you
That's
have this,
I was
you
going to
know,
quote the same thing there. I mean, that's
yeah,
basically what it is. And I mean, not, I'm smart enough to know, like you're describing your son's educational journey here early on, and all these familiar faces and names that are around him. Um, it sounds like you appreciate that like I do, or like maybe I didn't appreciate it as much back then, but looking back on it, it's everybody's kind of got your back, everybody's pulling for you, everybody's trying to send you down the right path.
absolutely. And they step up for you, because none of us are good at everything. Some are better at more things than others. But you mentioned coaching with your brother, and that's generous to me because as I mentioned, I was no basketball player ever, and I'm really have no business being much of a coach. But I want to support these little kids, the kindergartners, the first graders. So I'm blessed not only with guys like Jesse that I didn't know that well until we met through school, but for example, now Jesse is now coaching in Albany, with your brother-in-law, I think, with a different team. But like I've got my friend Marshall Graves coaching, and Marshall and I go back to high school. He was my brother's classmate, but we coached against each other 20 years ago when his kids were younger. And long story short, he has no kids in the first grade or kindergarten. But he knows that his buddy Parker doesn't know much basketball, and he knows that it's important for these kids to learn from people who do. So even though he's busy with multiple jobs as a mechanic, a bus driver, a dad who's following his own kids, watching them play at PHS, Auburn, and wherever, he's stepping up and helping me and my team. Kind of with no dog in the hunt, kids that are grown or so. Sounds like Marpaw is a lot like that. Sounds like we kind of share that spirit. Am I right?
No, I think you're spot on, and it certainly doesn't sound like you take that for granted.
Not at all.
There's some
Yeah.
genuine appreciation there for what Mr. Graves is doing. From your perspective, it sounds like.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot in common there. So I'm gonna ask a question that I think will be helpful to our viewers here to learn something from this interview, which is coming from a place like that where it takes a village and there are all these great families and great people helping, rising tide lift all boats. What are some things you learned in your childhood in Maurepas that help you today to not only be successfully employed, but to lead? You now lead a program, and it's an important one. You're literally dealing with life and death. I admire your humility to say you're but a small part of it. But and look, there's no one man team in healthcare, right? But you're playing a leadership role there, a big part. What are some lessons you learned on the, in the woods of Maurepas, in the classrooms of Maurepas, on the dirt roads of Maurepas that now help you at Mary Bear Perkins?
Oh man, Well, I guess I'll say this, Parker, and I'm probably like you in this way, a little bit, I guess, but just some of the old stories you hear. Your family's been in this community for a long time, just like mine has been in my community. But man, we have it so much better than they did years ago.
Yeah.
You know, especially, I mean, I know Ponchatoula is the strawberry capital of the world, but there was a lot of strawberry farming that went on down in Marpaw generations
Right.
ago. You know, so like my grandparents, for example, they had to go pick strawberries, but like during strawberry season, school would let in late because they had to go pick berries to help support their family.
Yeah.
You know, and that's real. That happened. You know, so to think that that's where I came from, in a sense. I mean, I don't take those sorts of things for granted. So I guess to answer your question, it's just, I mean, there's a lot of pride in a hard day's work. You know,
Absolutely.
I do a different kind of work, I guess, than what they did. I'm not necessarily outside sweating, but the wheels are turning between my ears, I guess, and we're working with patients. And look, it's no fault of the patients, but sometimes, you know, things can be difficult, you know, so working in the environment that we do, the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, I mean, they work hard, Parker. They work hard for our patients, and they do them a great service every day.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into that, and I promise we will get it so folks, if you watch this interview hoping to hear about Mary Bird Perkins, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about the great things they do. But I'm enjoying picking Rocky's brain about his childhood. And I've left out one part that we frequently ask about on this show, which my guests don't always love when I ask this question, but my viewers, I think, always love when it gets answered because it's intriguing. And that is, we want to hear about your love story, Rocky. You mentioned this wonderful woman and her impact on your career. And you mentioned that you're both from Marpaw. So I doubt this is some scenario where you guys met sitting next to each other in the classroom at Southeastern. You probably knew her or knew of her before. So if you wouldn't mind, and if it's off limits, you won't hurt my feelings. Tell me to move on. But if you don't mind, share your love story. Tell us about how you and your wife came together to have this wonderful family with the daughter you mentioned. How'd that come to be?
Well, Parker, I've known my wife probably since, I don't know, she was 4 or 5 years old, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And
which, as we said earlier, we can't tell you how many years ago that was.
That's right.
We're not going to reveal her age, but wow, 4 or 5. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't. Man, you really put me on the spot here.
I should have warned you about that. Forgive me for neglecting to do so.
You left this topic out in the pregame.
Hey, we got you blushing here. I think people just like to kind of know, and maybe a better way to ask. You don't have to go tell the whole story.
No, you're good, man.
Yours is your own, but tell us about what you love about your wife and kind of why she's special to you and that kind of stuff. I think people here just love. I mean, look, we're not going to get sensational. This isn't Harry and Meghan. We don't need to know about drama with in-laws and who's in the, you know. But I do think as we're getting to know each other, you know, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't know that you had a great situation with a loving wife. You know what I'm saying? People like to see that success story because, and I'm going to give you, I forgot to mention that other, but I will give you a fair one on this because after you tell us a little about this, I'm going to ask you for advice you would give a young couple or maybe a couple that's known each other forever, because we live in a world where, you know, successful relationships are not that common. You know, everybody knows divorce rates are super high and most relationships never make it to marriage to get to divorce. So when you, like you mentioned, I mean, you and my dad really remind me a lot of each other. You're both basketball stars who did well and you have this Marlball thing in common. But you mentioned, you know, 15 years your wife was at North Oaks. My dad, my mom have been married 50 years. And so I love to hear advice from him. And I know it wasn't all, you know, roses, you know, like any relationship, peaks and valleys. But I'd love to ask advice-oriented questions on this show. So, and love, as I've learned talking to 95 people over the years, it comes from kind of all angles, right? But there's always some wisdom in how do you make it work for a while? And how do you make it work through career changes and, you know, stuff like that. So just going back to those, you know, flowers, stars in your eyes, early days, tell us a little bit about your wife.
Well, like I said, known her since she was 4 or 5 years old, but honestly, I didn't decide or didn't figure out that she was the one until I guess I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
And she held me off for a couple years, you know.
Good for her.
Yeah. So, but I guess to give some advice, and look, I'll say this. I mean, I am beyond far from perfect. So, you know, take any advice I give you with a grain of salt. But I mean, I guess so we have two children now. We have a 12-year-old and a 12-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. Look, that changes the dynamic of a marriage too, as you know.
I bet. Yeah.
You know, but man, I've just always looked at my wife as my complete and utter equal. You know,
Right.
I mean, we share in decision making. It is in all our decisions. I mean, we try to talk through those things and work together to make the decision that we think best benefits, you know, our marriage and our family.
Yeah.
But as far as during my career change, I mean, she's just incredibly supportive, you know, and it was great having her as a resource because
I bet.
Parker, I'm learning everything. You know, this is almost a start over, you know, from teaching high school social studies and coaching ball to, you know, learning how to start an IV. You know,
Yeah, no, that's like my dad, from going teaching high school English and coaching ball to chasing bad guys, you know, as a sheriff. I mean, you're right. It's a definite apples and oranges transition. And yeah, sure, there are lessons in your old job that you learn that can translate and help. But you're right. You never before had an IV
Sure.
in your old career. Well, look, I appreciate you being game for that kind of personal line of questioning. Forgive me for not mentioning that in the pregame. It was not intentional. It's just the nature of the beast here when you have an unorganized kind of hobby type show that we miss things from time to time. So for our viewers, in case you just chimed in and you're or tuned in, we're here with Rocky Brown. We're talking about his background. He's, you know, shared everything up to his love story with his wife, and, you know, kind of talked about how he got to where he is on this journey. And so let's talk about Mary Bird Perkins now, because we kind of get a feel for where you've come from, and you guys have an abundance of resources. In my life, I can share that my mom and my dad are both cancer survivors. They both had to get radiation, you know, chemo, all kinds of treatments. And thank God they're with us today, and they're cancer free and they're healthy. And I don't take that for granted. It inspired me to volunteer through First Baptist Church here in Ponchatoula in their cancer care ministry. They have a ministry called Our Journey of Hope that serves the local community and people going through that struggle, that challenge. And so my awareness is much higher today at age 45, having watched mom and dad and so many friends go through that, than it was, you know, years or decades past. And I know that people are, you know, kind of watching this interview from all different points of view. There might be some people fighting cancer watching. There might be some people like me that have family going through it. There might be people thinking about healthcare or a transition like you did, Rocky. And then there are the people that just tune in every week to watch the show and meet somebody new in Ponchatoula that don't have much thought on cancer. So if you would, starting from kind of the broad, big picture of cancer care, and then we'll zoom in on what you specifically do through your program. Let's talk about where Mary Bird Perkins fits in that mix.
Yeah, well, as you know, Parker, as you alluded to, but both of your parents experienced what it's like to go through treatment for cancer. Mary Bird is a community-based organization. When I say that, we have multiple locations across Southeast Louisiana, and Baton Rouge, you know, obviously we're headquartered there, but this community, this Southern Tangipahoa Hope Parish, or really Tangipahoa Hope Parish in general, is fortunate enough for 33, almost 34 years now, I think, to have our organization have that cancer care presence right here at home. And that means so much. But we, as far as our overall role in cancer care in the community, obviously we're a radiation treatment facility, but we offer support services to our patients, because look, what we want to do, we want to improve survivorship and lessen the burden of cancer. So yes, we're treating people for cancer and trying to help them get past that. But we want to try to do what we can besides just clinical treatments to help them on that journey, because it's difficult on them, as you know.
Right.
You've
Yeah,
seen it
absolutely.
firsthand. But it's difficult on the family as well. And Parker, I don't want to speak out of turn, but you guys are fortunate. You have resources and family close by, and
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
your parents could lean on you and your siblings.
Right.
And the harsh reality, man, is that not everybody has that.
That's a great point. I mean, we were so numerous. We had, with multiple brothers living here, and my mom. Thankfully, mom and dad didn't get it at the same time, so they were both well as caregivers. But you're right. When we would take them to chemo, we would see people there that sadly had to drive themselves sometimes. And same thing with radiation. So you're right, and that's something I learned through my recent training for cancer care. Is we need to focus on those caregivers because they're fighting their own fight. And while it's clearly different and distinct from the actual patient, it's terrifying. It's difficult on so many levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially. So it's neat that you, as the actual caregivers, as the actual clinic, see that's super important.
Yeah, I think that's so we do work hard as an organization to try to fill those gaps, Parker, where they exist, and everybody's different. Everybody's social or economic situation is different. Everybody's cancer diagnosis is different. No two patients are exactly alike.
Right.
So we try to fill those gaps where we can. That's one thing that Mary Bird does. It makes us unique as a nonprofit organization, where we raise funds that stay local to help patients here locally in our markets.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes
sense. And thank you for mentioning that, because I don't think, everyone understands that it's a nonprofit and that donations are so important. And look, I get it. We're coming off a pandemic. Times are tight. Things are tough for a lot of reasons. But I have seen with my own two eyes, your organization put money to good use through my parents who received care there. My little brother, Louie, who now lives in Houston, one of his best friends, in fact, his roommate, was a kid named Ben Blanchard, who died of cancer as a very young man. His family and friends got together and did this enormous endowment to Mary Bird Perkins, and it has made such an impact. He was a St. Tammany guy, so I don't think he treated in Hammond, but it was under the same umbrella. And, I saw, because this was something for years and years, the family, the friends, I think Louis may have been on the board that collected funds. They would raise these monies and then, donate it. And there was always something, concrete and important that it would go to, be it patient care, equipment, you name it. But we do need to keep that in mind, because so many families like mine have received this great treatment and it's nearby. You don't always have to drive to Baton Rouge, to get radiation. You can do it right here in Hammond, as my dad did. But that can't happen without generosity coming from those who can afford. Is that right?
No, that's spot on, Parker. And you alluded to COVID and kind of coming out of that, and maybe some of the economic hardships or downturn that we're experiencing right now with inflation and different things like that. One would think that it would hurt philanthropy, but I mean, this community, I'm just speaking about the Tangipahoa community, the Hammond Ponchatoula area, and the market that we serve. Man, we just wrapped up Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October. I mean, things go by so fast. It's almost Christmas, but that's a month-long fundraising initiative that we have, our Go Pink initiative. And man, we had a banner year fundraising wise for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I was going to mention earlier, I don't know why that's the case, but in my time at Mary Bird, what I didn't realize, Parker, when I started with them, and what I've come to realize now, and it just becomes more evident as each day passes. But man, there are so many people out there. Either if they haven't had cancer, their parents have, or their siblings have, or their grandparents have, or their best friends have. So it just affects so many people. And I think
absolutely. And I think it's one of those things. I don't know if you've ever bought a car you really like, and then the next week you're driving down the street and it seems like they're 10 times more. You're like, wait, everybody's got, a gray F-150 with this package.
Right.
No, the same amount of that car were there last week, but you weren't aware to it until it was yours. And I know that with my mom. She had cancer first with us, and I was basically fairly oblivious to cancer in the community until it happened to my mom. And then I started doing Relay for Life, and like you say, October became wear pink all the time and support, and it's everywhere. I mean, you and I a few minutes ago, we were meeting with our show's executive producer, Danny Lynn Dennis. I just pulled up her quote here, and she says she's very thankful for what Mary Bird and their team did for her mom during her multiple battles with cancer. Aunt Sonny, if you're watching, we love you. You are such a warrior, and you have been so strong throughout all that. And you're right, Rocky. The caretakers need their support too. Danny, her brother, the whole family. But what an example this is, just in this is a 3-person show. It was host, guest, and a producer behind the scenes. And, we've all kind of been touched by this, right? So I would imagine you can't go anywhere, Rocky, without being, encountered by somebody who's got some connection with cancer, whether they've had it or not.
That's it. Look, when I meet somebody for the first time, especially, well, not necessarily just in this community, but just in general, Parker, and the Mary Bird name, I guess it carries weight, but
absolutely,
whenever people find out what I do and who I work for, immediately it almost always evolves into one of those stories where, it may have been them, or if it wasn't them, it was a family member or a close friend. It just seems like almost everyone has been touched, in one way or another by cancer.
So, for sure. But it must be neat working for a place that's so appreciated, because the sad reality with cancer is, while there are some glorious, miraculous, God-given stories like my parents, there are so many sad endings. Okay. There are so many painful memories that are associated with it. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, it's easy to, like, for example, I think back, I went to the Super Bowl when the Saints won the Super Bowl. That's a day I'll never forget. It was incredible, right? They won. It was just a game, right? It was all fun. But cancer is a different animal. It can be the worst memory of your life. So it's hard sometimes to disassociate, your memories and your feelings from the care you got. But Mary Bird Perkins seems to be incredibly respected. People just have such a good feel no matter how the situation ended, because not only do you provide world-class healthcare, but you provide genuine human care. Like you mentioned earlier, whether it's holding the hand. Like, for example, my dad's battle with cancer, and I don't think you were yet program director when my dad went through cancer. So I think you actually literally helped him. He had throat cancer. So he had to, put on this harness, this helmet, or whatever y'all call it. He had to get strapped in. And I remember how difficult it was for him to psych himself up for that, to know going in that he was going to be in the most claustrophobic, like just a really difficult, challenging, something I could never do. I'm not tough enough. I don't have that metal. But one reason why he loves you, it's not just that y'all had a Marpaw and a basketball connection, but you had such a genuine human connection, and you supported him, and he could, kind of feel that genuine care, right? So is that just you, or is that a team value? And if so, how do y'all get there? How do you get the whole team to buy into that and do it? Because I hear tons of great feedback, whether it's Danny Lynn or other people I know coming out of there saying, man, they took great care of me.
And clearly your father is an absolute success story, right?
Yeah, he's a warrior.
But as you alluded to, I mean, not all journeys end that way.
Of course.
So it's very easy for me or for anybody else to see why your dad doesn't mind heaping praise on Mary Bird Perkins. But sure. I guess what I would say to that is, I would hope that no matter how somebody's journey ends, whether it's a success like your dad's or however it may end, that those family members could still praise us, knowing that we've done everything that we could, and no matter that, or no matter what the situation is, Parker, if it's bleak, if it's bright, I think we pride ourselves on it's not going to affect the way that we care for people. We're going to give that same quality of care regardless of the situation. the patient or the family is in.
Yeah, that's admirable. I want to share with you, getting some love thrown your way from Carla Van Vranken. Carla, thank you for tuning in. The Van Vranken family is one of the best here in Ponchatoula. And Carla, we appreciate you and your time. So thank you for sharing that love with Rocky and Mary Bird Perkins and the show. If anybody, I should have mentioned that when I put Danny Lynn's comment up, so forgive me. If you have a question for Rocky, if you want to leave a comment like Carla just did, while we're live here, please do so. He's got a family to get back to, a daughter, a son, and a wife. They're probably expecting him to help make dinner or clean up or something. So I won't keep him here all night. But if you have a question, whether it's about personal, Mary Bird, whatever, feel free to chime in. And Carla, thank you for doing that. Once again here, folks. Oh, well, go ahead, Rocky. I'm sorry.
I'm looking out the window here. I'm just glad it looks like I won't be driving home in a storm.
Yeah, it was a little dicey. I appreciate you sticking with us. I texted you earlier today when the whole world around here seemed to be shutting down, and it gave you an opportunity to get off the hook, but you stuck with it, and I appreciate that. But yeah, you're right, man. It's much calmer. Today was a wild day. I got sent. Let's see if I can get this up here. There was of course, there are tornadoes all over today, but let's see here. This one here, if you can see, was not that far from my family's farm up, which is in between Laranja and Husser and Folsom, that area.
Yep.
So that's some scary. That to me looks like kind of an Oklahoma Bill Paxton movie, right? Twister style. So I had my kids here at the office, and when they saw that, my boy Luke got a little serious about his he got under the couch. But yeah.
Any reports on a lot of damage up that way, Parker? We've got some staff members that live up there, but I haven't heard from them.
I haven't heard anything. So, folks, if you do have info on that, please share it. But for those watching live on this day in December when we're filming this, there have been some bad tornado activity around here. I heard French Settlement had a tornado. Again, no damage report. Don't know anything about the specifics. But, that the Folsom Husser area there, tornado I just showed, they've been running wild around here. So thank you for sticking in with us. We're here again, folks, with Rocky Brown. We're talking about Mary Bird Perkins. We're talking about his life and kind of his story. Can you give us a feel, Rocky, if you would, for what's a day in the life like at your clinic, in terms of, who are you seeing? What are y'all doing? Because, again, I've got one point of view, which is having watched Dad go through there. He and my mom have both received radiation, so it's something my family knows well. But for a lot of folks, I would imagine that's a scary word. It's a foreign concept. We may be aware that it is a type of cancer treatment, but maybe not understand why or how it works. Would you just give us a little bit of a primer on kind of what to expect for people that haven't been through it?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess just a typical day, Parker, I'll start there.
That'd be great.
There's really three reasons why a patient would come in our doors. They're either there to have a visit with one of our radiation oncologists. It may be the consultation visit, the first visit they've ever had. The second reason would be to actually come to receive radiation treatment. And that happens. Each patient is going to do that numerous times. You had alluded to that when your father went through it. And then the third reason, another service that we offer is diagnostic imaging. Those cancer detection studies that I used to do, those PET scans. So those are the three reasons why a patient would come to Mary Bird Perkins. As far as how their treatment journey or plan would start, we're a referral-based operation, so we get referrals from outside physicians. If a patient is diagnosed with cancer, that physician who discovered that diagnosis is going to refer them to us.
Gotcha.
So that's how they come to see our radiation oncologist.
So if, for example, you're getting your checkup with your PCP, your primary care doctor, and they think you've got something that needs checking out, they can refer from wherever they are to you at Mary Bird Perkins, and you can do the PET scan there to determine what's going on. And then if they do need radiation treatment, if that's recommended, they can come meet with your physician who is a radiation oncologist to get a game plan going, and then other members of the team can help implement that and actually administer the treatment. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. So like just a hypothetical lung cancer patient.
Mm-hmm.
More times than not, what's going to happen is that patient ends up having a CAT scan. And in that CAT scan, usually the pulmonologist or the radiologist will recognize something that is classified as an abnormality. They can't say for sure, looking at that PET scan, that it is cancerous.
Right.
So that's going to trigger what the process that you just talked about. The cancer detection study, the PET scan, is what's going to be next in that patient's future.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that abnormal scan that they had elsewhere. And once we do that scan, if we do determine that it is cancerous, they're going to be referred to one of our radiation oncologists for consultation.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I promised I'd get you out of here on time, and so we're close to closing down. But I want to ask about kind of what you've learned in your career doing this, that you think would be helpful to a family that's going through a cancer battle, whether it's a caregiver, whether it's a patient, whether it's just a family member who wants to send a card, give a card, whatever. But you've spent so much time with people that are going through this. And I'm sure you observe, whether it's, in the waiting room or in the, anywhere in the mix, there are mistakes that are made that could easily be avoided. There are opportunities that are missed. What's your advice for people, going through or on the periphery of a cancer situation?
Yeah. Man, honestly, Parker, this is going to sound, I guess, kind of simplistic, but it just seems as though I think the emotional component and how that patient and that family approach the situation means so much.
Mm-hmm.
If that patient is positive and upbeat and puts faith in their physician and our support staff, it just seems to make the journey. Again, you don't know how these treatment journeys are going to end. You guys were fortunate, like with your father, but like I said earlier, they don't all end that way. But that positive attitude is going to make the journey, no matter how it ends, that much better. I'm a believer in it, and I think that it potentially does affect the final outcome.
Yeah.
That's why we provide social services. We have a social worker in house because we want to, like I was saying earlier, we want to try to close those gaps to make that journey as least of a burden as we possibly can on that patient and their family so they can focus on conquering cancer.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I appreciate it. So we'll close with this question, okay? And feel free to take this in any direction you want, but I want to just ask, what we haven't asked you about today, what you haven't had the opportunity to talk about, anything at all that's on your mind, on your heart, what would you like to share with our viewers before we conclude?
Oh man, I guess I would just like to say how appreciative I am personally for the support that this community continues to show our cancer care center. And we have a great group of physicians. We're blessed to have them. Our support staff, our radiation therapists, our nursing staff, everybody in our building. I guess I would just like everybody to know that we work together to do the best that we can to serve the needs of this community. And that's as genuine and sincere as I can possibly be, Parker. We're there to serve the people here in Ponchatoula, Hope Parish, and the surrounding area.
Well, and you're doing it really well, and for that, we thank you. So on behalf of Ponchatoula, people here, families like mine that have been through it, families that are still going through it, families that don't know yet, but they will be going through it, I say thank you for doing a job well and doing it with empathy and doing it with genuine care for the human experience, because I think that's something y'all really excel at. So, Rocky, thank you for being here. I know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. And the same thing goes for you, our viewers and listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Ponchatoula Live will be back next week. And until then, we say bye. Take care.